You're going to want to sit down for this one. Kevin O'Leary gave the insider perspective to these Trump tariffs as someone who does business in China, and it left this reporter from Yahoo nothing to come back with. But I think there's an even bigger story here than meets the eye, so please watch this incredible exchange before I tell you more about it.
But Kevin, as of this morning, with the 34% retaliatory tariff from China to the United States, we are not getting closer to free trade. We are just getting further into a trade war.
No, China's a whole different story. This isn't about trade war with China. This is about leveling the playing field on a wide range of issues, including IP law, access to business, access to courts, being compliant with U.S. regulations on securities. There is a laundry list of grievances with China that have been around since they joined the WTO. And none of the administrations previously have ever dealt with China.
So why are tariffs the right way?
Dealt with for the first time. So this has nothing to do with just tariffs. I mean, right now I can't litigate.
But that's the tool that the administration is using. Why are tariffs the correct tool if, to your point, these have nothing to do with tariffs?
What tool do you suggest they do when nothing else has worked?
I'm not the president. It's not my job.
Well, exactly. So let him do his work. China's different than all the other countries.
But it's not
China
working,
has to be dealt
right?
with. Look, I'm having lots of problems with China, as are millions of other companies in the United States that try to do business there. They do not play by the rules. They're going to have to start doing it pretty soon. That's a different conversation. You want to talk about the markets correcting? Yes, they are. By the way, markets correct every 18 months up to 20%. You're watching it happen right now. It's not pleasant. You can't blame just the tariffs for this. These have been very expensive markets now for almost 18 months. Now they're having a correction.
And in that moment, you've seen the flawed mindset that has even landed the US in such an unfavorable trade imbalance with China to begin with. I want you to remember something. I believe when Kevin O'Leary calls China a completely different animal, it's because that country is a unique mix of state control and shrewd capitalism. And the CCP doesn't hesitate to scoot even if its own laws and treaties if it rakes in more money and influence. By the way, we're asking the tough questions no one else can, so please be sure to subscribe to Millionaire Mentor to join the movement. Now, why do you think, for example, that China and Chinese companies have been illegally profiting off of hundreds of billions of dollars of stolen American intellectual property and not doing anything about it for over 2 decades that they've been part of the World Trade Organization? Why are they so stringent with American companies operating inside China, but gladly create knockoffs that dominate? And that even includes expensive military equipment that China's allegedly stolen IP for and reverse engineered where they can. It's the last 20 years of negligence that have landed China in a completely different category when you talk about trade and tariffs, and it's about time someone did something about it. I mean, if you talk to Kevin O'Leary, he's even called for a 400% tariff on China, which sounds hyperbolic, but still drives home the point.
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look like?
I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. It's just not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning.
Now here's why. In order to get a behemoth like China on the negotiating table, you need to raise the cost of the status quo. A country that does not even allow American social media companies to operate has not just industrialized itself on the backs of the American economy, but also been on the benefiting end of rising trade imbalances for decades. And all of this while China, as a highly collective and state capitalist regime, does not even care about things like worker regulations, minimum wage, or IP protection if it can get away with it. Inside the ambit of peace, there's no other way to twist the Chinese arm to play by the rules That's the picture that separates China from the rest of the world that Kevin understands.
We've never done this before. We've never taken on the entire globe. Usually it's done in trade agreements with specific countries, such as NAFTA, which was Canada and Mexico, or a European Union situation. This is unique, over 60 countries. Now, there's two aspects to these tariffs. Number one is reciprocality against tariffs from one country to another based on products and services that are specific. So if you're charging a 20% tariff in India, it's going to be reciprocated in the United States. And those go away pretty quickly. That actually leads to fair trade. The more complex aspect of these negotiations are around the idea of trade imbalances. And so when you put on tariffs to try and fix trade imbalance, it's difficult because the largest economy on earth is the United States. So really you're starting a behemoth negotiation, and it's happening in every country. You highlighted Canada, but you might as well talk about Britain or even Switzerland, where I am right now, where they have over 30% tariffs imposed 48 hours ago. And so you can assume that behind the scenes are two spheres of negotiations. One is, let's try and reduce the imbalance of trade by buying more stuff from the United States. That's one signal. And the other, which is very easy to fix, is simply remove all tariffs. If you're going to have reciprocal tariffs at 20%, 30%, 40%, just get rid of them, bring them down to zero.
And that's what is most likely to happen, since over 50 countries have already started ringing up the US president for a renegotiation of these tariffs. But China's not one of them, because you have to realize China's not the same kind of player in these tariff exchanges as a country like Canada and Switzerland. Not just that, a large part of how the Chinese Communist Party derives its legitimacy in a non-democratic state is by the economic rise and employment opportunities for its 1.5 billion people. And in a very large part, that hasn't happened because of some ungodly might of Xi Jinping's economic mind, but because of the many global trade loopholes that giants like the US have allowed it to take advantage of. There's no one that has even attempted to plug those loopholes, which is why you see such a rattling and shifting in the trade relations between the two countries that even China understands it cannot let it escalate into a trade war with its largest trading partner in the US. And if that's true for China, you can see how accurate and effective this red shift could be for the next door friendly neighbor like Canada.
A lot of things that economists tell me are not fixable via tariffs, but I am curious from your perspective then, why do you think that we are moving towards a negotiation where these tariffs are not going to be as bad as they seem right now, at least for financial markets? What is it that gives you confidence that there is going to be a negotiation reached?
Because there's a good reason to do it. I mean, you got to distinguish the noise versus the signal. I've said this countless times about Trump. Let's take the Canadian situation, which we've been talking about. If you combine those economies, I'm not saying buying the country, but if you combine the economies, which seems impossible to do given the rhetoric and what's going on right now, but the truth is, the signal is it would be much stronger against China if there were no tariffs between Canada and the United States and they had a common currency and they protected the northern border, not the 49th parallel. Now, the Canadians know that's worth it because 75% of their output has been sold to the United States for over 120 years. 17 states call Canada the #1 trading partner. 28 states, in addition to those 17, #2 trading partner is Canada. So it'd be economic suicide not to work this out. The obvious answer is to remove all tariffs, and that will happen, my guess is, right after the election when the Canadians make their choice about who they want to lead them. That person will fly to Washington immediately and start negotiations, which I would call NAFTA 3. But right now, that's not happening because Carney's trying to use this whole Trump issue as fulcrum to try and distract Canadians away from the facts that he wiped out the country. Maybe he'll get elected, maybe he won't. Nobody knows right now. But nothing's going to happen on the Canadian situation until the election's over in just over 5 weeks.
That is spot on. Despite the rise of an Asian global pull with China, the United States is still unavoidable as a lucrative market for trade, and that's a leverage this country has forgotten to use in the last 2 decades, instead being taken advantage of by countries trying to rapidly industrialize. Beyond the noise of the mainstream media, that's the realignment we're seeing play out right now. But tell me in the comments what you think about this, because these next few weeks hold the signal for where the shift in the status quo of global trade will eventually lead.